Hey guys, today I've got an Android head unit review for you, and it is the Makidi M6 Pro. Now, this is their flagship head unit, and it just happens to be the most powerful Android head unit that I have ever tested to date. It's got an octa-core processor with 8 GB of RAM. It has a 1200p high definition display, and what makes it special is that it has an HDMI port input. Let me show you. So let's start with who Makidi actually are. Well, they've been around for about 10 years in the Android head unit industry. They're known under 2 different brands, Makidi and NaviFly. Those are the same company, and you will see their products under both brand names. They're a company who make products for specific brands of car. So when you buy their head units, they generally sell them with the trims that make them look factory in your car, and also the harnesses and CAN bus decoders to make them plug and play in the vehicle and just work. The other thing about this company is that they only sell decent spec devices. So even though they do give you a choice between like 2 GB of RAM up to 8 GB of RAM, whatever you choose is going to be fit for purpose, and it's going to be plenty fast for whatever you want to do. Obviously you can spend more money and get something faster. Which brings us to this bad boy, the M6 Pro, which has crazy specifications. So you get your 7862 8-core CPU, you get 8 GB of memory, you get 256 GB of internal storage space, you get a screen resolution of 1200p, which is fantastic. Then you have the Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It has an awesome amplifier and DSP chip, and it has the optical and coax digital outputs as well. And then it has HDMI in, which means that you can connect things like games consoles to this head unit. And that is something I have never seen before. Now, before I get it out of the box, remember that I don't get paid to endorse any companies or products. And this is going to be completely based on my own opinion of unboxing and trying this thing out. So with that in mind, let's get it out. And here it is. But before I show you it, let me just show you that the packaging for this is something I've never seen on an Android head unit. It has this magnetic closing box, and all the foam is very specifically cut out just for this head unit, and it really shows you like this is a quality product. And yeah, it's unusual for an Android head unit. Anyway, I digress. So here it is. And the first thing that you're going to notice is it shares the same form factor, the same shape as a lot of other Android head units. And just to explain why that is, they all share an industry standard, and that is so that the head unit is just going to fit into the dash trims for specific vehicles. So all of the different brands can share the same dash trim, and they're just going to slot straight in. So that's the reason why they all have this shape. But there are differences between this head unit and the others, which I'm going to go into now. First of all, it's heavy. It is very heavy, and you can see that it's actually made of metal behind. But before I get into that, let me just show you the front here. So you can see you have a mic and reset button here, and that's all. That's the only thing on the front of this display. Normally on the other Android head units you'd have these capacitive touch buttons down here, but what Makidi have done instead is they have increased the size of the screen in the same space. So you get that bigger screen with the higher resolution, and yeah, that's what we have here. They've also given you a screen protector on here as well, already fitted, so that's nice. Now, let's have a look at the back. As I said before, it's heavy, and that's because the whole back of this is made of metal and it's acting as a heatsink, and you do actually have an active fan here as well. So those higher specifications that are going to generate additional heat are going to be kept cool adequately, which is great. So here we have a socket for the radio antenna. We have a built-on 5 GHz Wi-Fi antenna. We have a FACRA connector for the GPS antenna. We have a FACRA connector for the 4G mobile antenna connector here. We have a HDMI input, HDMI in. Ooh. I'm going to play with that later, but again, there's no other head unit that I'm even aware of which actually has a HDMI for video input. You have the absolutely great coax and optical toss links for digital outputs, and that means that this particular head unit has the ability to have your audio going through digital connections to an amp or an external DSP or whatever else you have in your car which uses a digital connection, which means you don't need to use RCAs, which means it eradicates any possibility of noise or interference that comes through the copper cabling. So that in itself is fantastic. You've got your external microphone input here, you've got your main loom entry point here, and then you've got these other connections which I'll show you in a bit. Also in the box you're going to get the main loom, which is going to have a connection for your specific car and the CABUS decoder as well. 3 USB ports, a 4G mobile connection antenna, a GPS antenna, an external microphone, a small loom for the reverse camera, and we have this loom here with all the RCAs. So we've got front left, front right, left, rear right, and then center and subwoofer. So it has a center channel. This is 5.1 channels of audio, and it actually does decode into 5.1 channels of audio as well if you have a center speaker, so that is really cool. You also have an analog video and audio input, and then the amp trigger wires also on this loom. And then this big black thing here is where you put your 4G SIM card, and that's how you get your data connection permanently on this head unit if you want one. So that's all the stuff that comes with this head unit, but I did order some other stuff. So this is a dash cam which integrates with this. You can see the video stream from the camera on the actual screen of the Makidi system itself. And what I didn't realize is this actually comes with a rear camera as well, and it records from both, which is really cool. And I didn't know that. So I actually also ordered a HD 1080p reverse camera as well, which I probably won't be using because the camera that this records from can also be used as a reverse camera as well. So I also got this ODB2 reader as well, so I can install torque or whatever and get some engine data on the screen of the Makidi unit as well, so that's going to be cool. Right, I guess it's time to actually go and plug it in and see how it works.
So here we are in the Saab 9-3 with the Makidi M6 Pro Plus installed. This is amazing. Right, we're going to start with the usual thing, so we're going to turn it on and see how long it takes to boot up. Ignition is now on. And there we go, so it's an instant on, and that's what you'd expect for a premium head unit. Now obviously if you leave it for a couple of days switched off, it will need to do a cold boot, and that will take a little bit longer, but because of the specification it still will be quite fast. Unfortunately I can't show you that now. So we'll start this video with the look and feel of the device, and before I go into the launcher software, let's have a few words about the screen itself because it's excellent, and you're going to see how good it is as I'm going in between different apps. But what I wanted to mention is the fact it is so sharp, the contrast ratio is great, the resolution is 1200p. Now let's move on to the launcher software itself. It's probably one of my favorite, I'll tell you why now. So what we have is a very large widget on the top left here. This widget allows you to run specific apps on the launcher. And at the moment what we have is the DVR camera showing on it. And also there's a rear camera there as well, but we'll talk about that later in the features section. But you can change what's in this window by going to settings and going into general, and then going to launch app setting here and choosing something else that you want to have in that window. So now, for example, I have Google Maps in this window, so I can literally navigate whilst I'm still on the launcher software. And I really love this. This is what made the TI's launcher and the Joying launchers really good. But what Makidi have done, have gone a step further, and they've allowed you to have other apps in this window. So you can have things like Netflix, Waze, you can have their DVR system, and there's probably other stuff that I haven't even found yet for this window. So this automatically makes it one of my favorite launchers made. Then over here we have a little widget for the time and date. We have a local music application here, so if you've got any music on a memory card or a USB stick, or even locally on the head unit, MP3 files, they will play on here. So along the bottom here we have apps which I have specifically chosen to be here, which is another reason why this is a great launcher, because it allows you to put your own icons on here and you can pick and choose them as you will. On the left hand side here it has this bar, and the bar represents the last apps that you use. And on the bottom left here you have the apps, and as you can see it's nice and easy to navigate, and you can see how that high-res screen makes everything just look glorious as well. Now if you don't like the way that this launcher looks, if you go into the settings and you go into the factory settings, its password is 3368. Scroll down until you find launcher selection here, You can see I'm on the last one, but say I change it to this one here. There you go. You can see that you can have different variations of the launcher, you know, how you want it to be. So as you can see, it's a beautiful dashboard with actual features which are useful, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite launchers. Now, they could make it better by making this songs widget work with Spotify. That's my only gripe with it. I can't control my Spotify tracks from this widget, but that's a small thing, and it's something that can be looked at for an update in the future. But yeah. Okay, so let's talk about speed. So as you can see, it's using the 7862A ARM architecture CPU, which is an amazing 8-core CPU, and it has a massive 8 GB of RAM, and that's where you can see that it also has a resolution of 1200p as well. So the specifications should mean that this thing is lightning fast, but we should test that with our normal speed tests using Waze and Spotify. So let's run Spotify. Yeah, I mean, that is basically an instant boot time for Spotify. I mean, that is just absolutely glorious. If you watch my channel and you see me running these speed tests and how long it generally takes Android head units to get to a point where it can play music in Spotify, it's a lot longer than that. So that is absolutely awesome. Right, let's try Waze. Yeah, it's seconds. It's a couple of seconds to get to the point where you can use Waze from the moment that you open it. And again, it is definitely one of the fastest head units that I've ever tested. It definitely has the best overall specifications of any head unit that I've ever tested. So absolutely spectacular. From a speed perspective, amazing. Let's talk about features, because this has plenty. It is an Android head unit, and by default you're going to get all the good stuff associated with that, like the ability to install video applications, of watch Netflix and YouTube and anything else that you want to install onto it, because it has that flexibility. And if you set up your car correctly, this will actually decode 5.1 channels of sound, which means you get surround sound in your car, and that is awesome. Staying on the subject of features, we have the DVR that I have shown you already, which comes with both the front and the rear cameras in high definition, and it does actually have a very, very sharp image. It's very, very nice indeed. And as I mentioned before, the rear facing camera for the DVR does actually double up as a reverse camera. Now, as you know, I did order the reverse camera separately because I didn't know it actually had this feature. So I did take the opportunity to install both cameras, both the reverse camera and the rear DVR camera as well, just to see if there was any difference in quality, and you will be able to see here. So at the moment what we're looking at is the DVR camera, reverse camera, and this is the reverse camera. Now, I have actually got this aimed a little bit lower as an actual reverse camera, but you can see that there is less detail in this particular image than there is in the actual DVR image. So another reason why you should go for the DVR kit, using the rear camera as a reverse camera instead of actually buying the reverse camera itself. But they both do the job though. As you can see, it's keeping track of the car in front of me. But this is really very much a gimmick. It's not something you'll be using, and as I say, the alarms do go off quite frequently for no apparent reason, and as a result of that, it will be switched off. You may find that Makidi will release an update to the software for this device, so that perhaps you can have the graphics and not the audio part of it, or they might make it so that it is actually more accurate. But as you can see, it's not great having keep going off all the time. Now, one of the other things you've probably seen is this little robot thing in the corner, which has a little bubble here which says get help, play music, play online music. And as you heard, it's just recognized my voice giving it a command to play music.
I'm still learning.
Open Spotify.
Okay.
And that's pretty cool. I mean, it's a bit of a gimmick and it's not really that accurate, but it's still a cool little feature of this head unit. And that brings us to the HDMI in functionality of this head unit, which I'm going to show you now. So if I'm going to hit HDMI 1, I've got my PlayStation controller, so I'm just turning my PlayStation on. Now, there is a PlayStation 4 on the back seat of this car currently, and it is being powered by the car. It's plugged into an inverter, and I'll do a video on inverters in the future. Essentially, they give you the ability to have 220 volts or 110 volts if you're in the US, so that you can power household appliances within your vehicle. And that's basically what I've done here. I've got the PlayStation being powered by the car using an inverter, and the HDMI going into the back of this head unit, which has now given me total control to play games in the car using proper games consoles. And that means that if I wanted to, I could plug in a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X or a Nintendo Switch or anything that uses HDMI, including Amazon Fire Sticks and all of that good stuff. Like, whatever you want to plug into this, it's effectively a TV at this point. It's got a HDMI in, and that is really, really cool. Now, from a car integration perspective, the Makiti does actually have full canvas integration. That means if you have a compatible car, it will have climate controls, heated seats, parking sensors, and a bunch of other stuff that will be integratable straight into the screen, which is great. But if you have an older vehicle like I do, then you can still program in your steering wheel controls, and you do that by going into the settings here, going into general, scrolling to the bottom, finding steering wheel settings here, and then you can push and hold a button on the steering wheel and then press the corresponding button on the screen, and that's very, very easy to link up your steering wheel to this unit. It was very, very quick for me to do that, which is great. And finally, let's talk about the sound quality, which is absolutely spectacular on this head unit. So if we go into the settings and then we go into device and then sound. So initially on this screen, you have simple options like the ability to turn on and off an external amplifier. You've got loud mode on and off, which exaggerates specific areas of the frequency ranges at lower volumes. You can reduce the power conditioning, which will in turn reduce the amount of power that the factory amplifier will receive in this car. So you get a nice, comfortable volume control range. Now, as you can see, going into the equalizer settings hasn't actually taken us to the equalizer, but what it has done is it's taken us to the DTS settings, where you can choose between 5.1 or 4.1 channels of sound. By default, the car will be set up to a 4.1 channel of sound, because the center speaker will not be set up unless you have physically wired it in yourself. So, but you do have the option of setting up via 5.1 or 4.1, and these effects actually really do improve the sound. They actually add a lot more definition to the music or movies that you're watching, so it really is worth having a play with this and seeing what difference it makes. This next tab here is the actual equalizer itself, and as you can see, you can move these individual frequencies up and down, and there is a lot of frequencies on here for you to play with, so it really does give you an enormous amount of control. And I have to say, this thing sounds really, really good. It's actually one of the best that I have ever used with regards to the actual quality of the sound that comes out of it, and a big part of that is because of the features that allow you to manipulate the sound on the actual software here. Field is your standard fade and balance. Surround actually gives you the ability to add delays to individual speakers, as we like to have, and it does give you the same options with the center speaker and the subwoofer as well, so that's great. Stereo sound enhancement gives you some more effects to alter the sound of the audio, as does reverberation. Bass enhancement allows you to control the front and rear speakers separately. Specifically for bass, you can select a specific frequency, and then you can up the gain of that particular frequency as well. So it's giving you specific controls over the front and rear speakers, which is really, really good. And finally, sound filter allows you to limit the high and low passes so that you can get that particular sound that you're looking for. Again, it separates the front and the rear of the car, so you can specify which speakers you want to sound in a particular way. So all in all, not only does this thing sound great, but it literally gives you all the control that you could ever want to actually get to that particular sound that you're looking for. So it really, really is a fantastic unit. Right, let's give it some scores. I hope this video was useful to you. If you have any questions, something that I missed in this video, please just ask in the comments section below and I'll see what I can do about answering it for you. If there's any brand of head unit that I have not yet reviewed and you would like me to, so that you can get an idea of what it's like, just let me know in the comments section and I'll see what I can do for you. And finally, if you like this kind of content, please do like and subscribe. It means a lot to me and there will be more content like this coming soon.